Why was everyone laughing at her before the first shot was even fired? Sarah Martinez walked onto the range carrying nothing more than her worn rifle case and a silence that unsettled even her own steps. Camp's sun bore down like a punishment, a ruthless California blaze that bleached the sky and made the asphalt shimmer. She adjusted her grip, the strap cutting into her palm, and kept walking as the laughter followed her like a shadow. She could hear them, the muttered jokes, the smirks turned into open ridicule. What's she doing here? Must gotten lost. Supply girl with a toy rifle. Their voices stung, but not because of their words. No, Sarah had heard worse growing up in East Los Angeles, where survival meant learning not to flinch when someone wanted to break you. What hurt was how familiar the laughter felt. The same sting, the same dismissal, the same cage built out of other people's expectations. She ignored it, at least she pretended to. The range was already lined with 43 competitors, soldiers, marines, and sailors with muscles stretched tight under pressed uniforms and confidence that smelled of arrogance. They strutted, compared rifles, swapped exaggerated stories about deployments. Sarah didn't join. She found her lane, firing position 7, and quietly opened her case. Her weapon wasn't impressive. Standard issue M4, no modifications, no scope. The finish worn thin at the edges from years of hands. Some competitors gave her sidelong glances, chuckling at the sight. Their rifles gleamed with custom barrels, polished triggers, expensive optics now useless under the competition's iron sights-only rule. But still, they looked expensive, professional. Hers looked like it had survived 3 wars and lost all of them. "Look what we got here," Staff Sergeant Mike called out loud enough for everyone to hear. A Marine with a chest that strained his uniform and a grin that carried the entitlement of someone used to winning. Did someone's girlfriend wander off from the commissary? Laughter erupted across the line. Sarah kept her head down, fingers steady as she assembled her rifle piece by piece. Click, slide, lock. Her movements were unhurried, practiced. She'd done this more times than she could count, though she doubted anyone watching noticed. She told herself she didn't care, that she'd come here for herself, not them. But as her chest tightened and her ears burned, she wondered if that was really true. The range master barked commands, his voice gravel wrapped in authority. Gunnery Sergeant Williams, 30 years of experience and scars around his eyes that made him look like he'd squinted at 1,000 battlefields. He didn't care who mocked who. He cared about safety, rules, and the purity of marksmanship. Targets at 100 yards, he called. Prone position, iron sights, 10 rounds. Sarah laid down on the mat. The ground was hot beneath her uniform. She pressed the stock into her shoulder, cheeks settling into its place like a key fitting a lock. She exhaled, long and slow, and in that breath she remembered her father. East Los Angeles, the desert heat. Empty cans set on rocks while the sun dipped toward the horizon. She was 12, too small for the rifle, but stubborn enough to refuse help. Her father's voice was low, steady, carrying both love and the kind of hardness only a Vietnam veteran could pass on. "Shooting isn't about being the biggest," he whispered. "It's about being still inside, even when the world is chaos." Still inside. The command came, "Commence firing." She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, echoing across the range, but she was already moving, already breathing, already aligning the next. Each round was its own universe. Each squeeze of the trigger a promise to herself. When the ceasefire call rang out and the targets flickered to life on the scoreboard, the murmurs turned into something else. 100 out of 100. 10 shots, 10 hits, grouped so tight they looked like a single coin pressed into paper. "Must be a malfunction," muttered, glaring at his own dismal score. His words didn't sound convincing, not even to himself. Sarah sat up, not smiling, not celebrating, just cleaning her rifle in silence. She knew better than to think one stage would change anything. Respect wasn't given, and for people like her, it wasn't earned quickly either. The second round was standing fire at 200 yards, the one that broke most competitors, The rifle shook with every breath, every heartbeat. Muscles burned, nerves betrayed, accuracy dissolved into frustration. Sarah rose to her feet, rifle in hand, and the loose sleeve of her uniform shifted. For just a second, the ink on her upper arm peeked through, dark lines, sharp, deliberate. Most missed it, but not him. Up in the observation area, Commander Jake Harrison leaned forward. Navy SEAL, 2 decades of operations that had carved caution into his bones. He had seen 1,000 tattoos, some bluster, some brotherhood, some pain. But this one, this glimpse of black lines woven into something deeper, made him straighten. He watched her raise the rifle. The range fell quiet except for the commands, fire. And once again, Sarah was still inside. Each shot snapped out crisp, controlled, mechanical in precision. When the scoreboard lit up, she'd done it again. Perfect. This time the murmurs grew louder, accusations bubbled, skepticism curdled into hostility. She's got to be cheating. Supply girl doesn't shoot like that. No way. Sarah ignored them, cleaning her weapon with calm hands, though inside the old storm churned. They didn't know her. They didn't know what she'd buried, what she was running from. They only knew the version she allowed them to see. And maybe that was the point. But Harrison knew enough to see what others couldn't. The tattoo had confirmed his suspicion, though only in fragments. He needed more, needed the full picture. Sarah felt the shift in the air before the men closed in. During the break before the 300-yard round, and his circle surrounded her. The stench of sweat, cheap bravado, and bruised pride pressed in around her. "What's your secret, supply girl?" sneered. "Special ammo, modified sights." Sarah looked up from her rifle, calm, steady. "Just practice." The laughter was sharp, cruel. "Practice?" one scoffed. "I've been shooting since before you were born. No way you're better than infantry." The circle tightened, words louder, meaner. The same old song, intimidation disguised as camaraderie, threats cloaked as jokes. Sarah ignored it, the way she'd learned to ignore gunshots in alleyways and insults in training. But even silence had its breaking point. Harrison watched from above, his expression sharpening as Sarah reached for a cleaning rod, her sleeve falling back again. This time the tattoo was unmistakable. An eagle's wings stylized, talons wrapped around a ribbon, Latin words etched beneath, and there, hidden in shadow, the numbers, 19D. Recognition hit him like a gunshot. He had seen it only a handful of times. Each one belonged to someone forged in fire, someone with a past you didn't uncover lightly. His jaw set. Who exactly was Sarah Martinez? And why was she here, competing quietly in a marksmanship contest, when that ink suggested she belonged somewhere far more dangerous? The next stage was about to begin. The wind picked up, shifting the flags, bending the mirages. Competitors cursed under their breath. Sarah, lying prone, only breath deeper. She thought of her father again, of being still inside, of how silence could be its own form of defiance. 10 shots, 10 hits, perfect again. The range went silent. Not in laughter this time, but in disbelief. And in that silence, Sarah felt the old self stirring, the self she had buried, the self she had feared, the one that could never truly stay hidden. What happens when silence becomes more dangerous than words? The scoreboard still glowed with numbers no one could argue against, but disbelief refused to die. Competitors muttered, voices rising in a low storm of accusation. Sarah, head bowed over her rifle, felt the weight of 43 pairs of eyes pressing into her back. Impossible. She's rigged something. No way that's legit. The range master's voice cracked across the air like a whip. Cease speculation, prep for inspection. Of course. Was the first to demand it. He stomped toward the table, his boots kicking up dust, jaw tight with indignation. She's hiding something. Check her rifle, her ammo. Hell, check her sleeves. Sarah's chest tightened. For a moment she wondered if she should protest, But what would that prove? Protest smelled like guilt, and she had no guilt here. Not about her weapon, at least, so she handed it over, calm, silent. Williams, the range master, took it in hands from decades of service. He opened chambers, checked bolts, examined rounds with the meticulous patience of a man who'd lived too long in the presence of liars. The crowd leaned in, expecting fireworks. Nothing. This weapon, Williams declared finally, is standard issue, in worse shape than most of yours. No modifications, no tricks. His mouth opened, then snapped shut when Harrison's shadow fell over the group. The SEAL commander had descended from the observation deck. His trident pin caught the light, a flare of authority that silenced even the most indignant whispers. "Problem here, Gunny." Harrison's voice was low, calm, the kind of calm that made even veterans stand. Williams shook his head. "No problem, sir. Just competitors who can't believe what they're seeing." Harrison's eyes found Sarah. She was standing quietly, rifle returned to her hands, sleeves rolled higher now against the sun. The ink was fully visible. The eagle, the ribbon, the code that wasn't meant to be read by outsiders. The SEAL's gaze narrowed, confirmation. And Sarah knew, she could feel it in the way he looked at her, the recognition, the unspoken question, "Why are you here, Sergeant?" The call came for the 400-yard stage. Sarah loaded her magazines with careful fingers, but her pulse wasn't steady anymore. She felt his presence at her side before he spoke. "Mind if I ask about your ink?" Harrison's tone was soft, too soft for anyone else to hear. Sarah's eyes flicked up, catching the sunlight glinting off the trident pin. She knew better than to lie, but the truth wasn't safe either. "Just something I got a while back, sir." "Nineteenth Group?" Harrison asked, his voice threaded with meaning. Her hands froze on the magazine. He knew. Very few could read the subtle layers etched into her tattoo. But this man had 20 years of operations etched into his bones, and those years had given him eyes sharp enough to cut through camouflage. "How did you?" she started. 20 years in special operations," he cut in gently. "I've learned to recognize signs. The question is, what's a former Green Beret doing in a supply unit, and why here in a competition like this?" Her throat went dry. She wanted to answer, wanted to unload the story that gnawed at her in the quiet hours of the night. But the words tangled. Not here. Not in front of strangers who already wanted to see her fail. "It's complicated, sir," she whispered. "I'll bet it is." His eyes softened, but his tone didn't waver. "Go shoot, we'll talk after." The line was called. Sarah shouldered her rifle and walked forward, her steps measured, though inside, nerves gnawed at the walls she'd built. At 400 yards, the targets were dots swallowed by shimmer and wind. Competitors squinted, cursed under their breath, their shots scattering across paper. Missed entirely, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. Sarah lay prone, her body aligning with the earth in angles drilled into her years ago. Breath slowed, heartbeat muted, the world narrowed. First shot center ring. Second shot touching the first. Third through 10th, tight cluster perfect again. Gasps replaced laughter. Even Williams looked shaken. And Harrison, he didn't cheer, he didn't smile. He only nodded the way one operator recognizes another. But Sarah didn't feel pride. She felt fear. Because every bullet she placed perfectly tore away the disguise she had built for 2 years. Every X-ring was another piece of her secret breaking free. The crowd buzzed louder now. Spectators who hadn't cared before began to gather, whispers filling the spaces between shots. "Who is she? Did you see that tattoo? Why's the SEAL commander watching her?" Her anonymity was slipping. The 5th stage was called. 500 yards. The line was crowded now with onlookers, off-duty personnel drawn by the story forming in real time. The supply girl who shot like a machine, the SEAL who suddenly cared. Sarah felt their eyes before she even went prone. The pressure was different now, heavier. Her chest rose too fast, breath caught. The first shot landed in the 9 ring. She cursed under her breath. The second, another 9. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Relief spread across a smug grin. "Looks like the magic's wearing off," he said loud enough for her to hear. Sarah's fourth shot landed an 8. Her pulse spiked, hands trembled. She wasn't failing, 96 out of 100 was still near flawless, but inside it felt like she was unraveling. She heard laughter again, not as loud as before but sharper. And somewhere, buried in the cracks of her concentration, the past began to claw its way up. "Not here, not now." Her father's words returned, a whisper beneath the noise. "Still inside, even when everything outside is chaos." She closed her eyes, let her lungs empty, let the silence stretch. When she opened them again, she wasn't a supply clerk. She wasn't the girl being mocked on the range. She was Sergeant Martinez, the operator who had once made shots under fire, under pressure, under death. The 5th shot dead center. 6th another perfect. 7th through 10th, tight cluster recovered. 96 out of 100, still extraordinary, but the crack had shown. The crowd clapped, but she heard only the mockery of behind her. "Amateur luck, nothing more." His voice scraped her nerves raw. She turned her head, eyes meeting his. Calm on the surface, fire underneath. "You calling me a cheater?" she asked softly. "I'm saying it's awful convenient that a supply clerk suddenly outshoots career infantry," spat, stepping closer. "Maybe you've got inside help. Maybe." "That's enough." Harrison's voice cut through the tension like steel through rope. Every head turned. The commander's eyes were sharp, his stance immovable. "I've been observing all day. Every shot she's fired is legitimate. Anyone who doubts it can take it up with me." Silence. His face flushed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. To argue with a fellow competitor was one thing. To challenge a SEAL commander, career suicide. One by one, they backed off, leaving Sarah alone with Harrison's gaze. Her hands trembled as she cleaned her rifle. Anger burned under her skin, but beneath the anger was something else, something more dangerous. Relief. She hated herself for it. Because the truth was, for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel alone. The 600-yard stage was next, the stage where legends were made or broken. Sarah knew the decision she had been avoiding all day could no longer wait. She could play small, hide behind fear, or she could shoot like who she really was. Her father's voice echoed once more, still inside. And she decided. Today she would stop hiding. What happens when the target is so far away? It feels like you're aiming at your own past. Sarah walked to the 600-yard line with her rifle in hand, but it wasn't the weapon that felt heavy. It was the choice. For 2 years she had dulled herself down, lived in supply rooms and paperwork, hidden her fire under the dust of anonymity. And yet, here she was, carrying it all to the longest stage of them all. The range stretched before her, the targets so distant they looked like small dots painted onto a horizon of heat shimmer. Wind flags snapped in erratic bursts, shifting east to west, then back again. Even veterans cursed under their breath. Williams's voice carried slow and steady. 10 rounds, 600 yards, prone position, shooters prepare. The crowd behind the firing line had doubled since the first round. Word had spread across the base. The quiet supply girl was rewriting the story of the competition. Some leaned forward with awe, others with suspicion, all of them hungry for either triumph or collapse. Sarah lay prone, aligning her body to the rifle with practiced precision. But this time, she didn't pretend. She didn't try to be invisible. She let the old self slip through, the part of her that had been trained for conditions far harsher than this. Her breathing slowed, her hands steadied, the world narrowed. She remembered the words of her sniper instructor, a legend with eyes that saw through fog and lies. At this distance, you're not firing a rifle. You're conducting a symphony of physics and patience. Miss one note and the song collapses. Her fingers touch the trigger. The call came, fire. The first shot broke. Through her iron sights, she saw the disc rise dead center, white against the black bulls. Perfect. She didn't allow herself to feel it. Already she was adjusting for the next. The wind had shifted half a breath to the left. She compensated, fired. Perfect again. Shot after shot, she built the rhythm. Each bullet was a conversation with the unseen forces around her: gravity, air, heat, pressure. She answered each one flawlessly. Behind her, silence spread. Not the mocking silence she had endured before. This was different, heavy, reverent. By her seventh shot, even the competitors had stopped firing just to watch. Prone in the next lane was unraveling. His shots scattered across his target like desperate guesses. He stole glances at Sarah, fury tightening his grip until his knuckles blanched. Her eighth shot found the center. Her ninth, just off the X-ring, still perfect by score, but for Sarah it burned. A miss in her mind. And that's when snapped. "This is impossible," he shouted, slamming his rifle down. His voice broke the strict silence of the range, drawing every eye. He stood, pointing an accusing hand toward her. "Nobody shoots like this. Not with iron sights. Not with a beat-up rifle. She's cheating. I demand an investigation." The murmurs erupted again, voices feeding the fire of doubt. Sarah stayed prone, her rifle pointed downrange, her jaw clenched with quiet fury. Commander Harrison stepped forward, his voice carrying like a command detonator. "Staff Sergeant, control yourself. Return to your position or be removed." "Sir, with respect," stammered, face red. "Supply soldiers don't shoot like snipers. This isn't right." The words cut through the crowd. They hung in the hot air like an accusation everyone wanted to believe. And Harrison's reply came slow, deliberate. "Maybe," he said, his eyes locked on Sarah. "That's because she isn't just a supply soldier." Gasps rippled through the audience, heads turned, eyes widened. The range master barked over the tension. "Staff Sergeant, your choices are simple. Resume firing or walk off my range. But you will not disrupt this competition further." His pride cracked under the weight of stares. He lay back down, fuming. Sarah still hadn't moved. Her ninth shot haunted her the way it had drifted just off center, not because the crowd would notice. They hadn't. To them she was still perfect, but she noticed, and that was enough. She had one round left. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness the past broke through. A barren Afghan hillside, dust in her throat, the stench of cordite. A boy too small, too thin, standing in the chaos with a weapon far too large for his arms. An RPG, pointed at her team. She remembered the shot, the way her training had taken over. Breathing slow, trigger squeezed, bullet sent, perfect hit. The boy dropped, the RPG clattered. And then the silence after. Her own voice had been screaming inside her head, not a fighter, a child. The investigation cleared her, but clearance couldn't erase the sight of a 14-year-old's eyes going blank. That was the day she'd stopped believing in herself. The day she had asked for transfer, for silence, for supply rooms and paperwork. The day she decided to bury the sniper. But here she was, with one shot left. Her eyes opened. The target shimmered in the distance. Her body aligned with a discipline older than fear. She let her breath go, found the stillness inside. The trigger broke. The disc rose, dead center. A perfect score. The range erupted, not with laughter, not with mockery, but with applause. Cheers shook the air. Some clapped with awe, others with disbelief, but all of them knew they had seen something legendary. Williams's voice cracked, louder than the noise. "Ladies, and 60 shots, 6 stages, and for the first time in the history of this competition, a perfect score." But Sarah didn't celebrate. She cleared her rifle, packed it away, and stood. The applause didn't reach her, not fully. because she knew what it meant. Her secret was no longer safe. Commander Harrison was waiting as she stepped off the line. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate her. His eyes were steady, unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, quiet, firm. "Not here, but we will." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. She'd known this moment would come. She had tried to delay it for 2 years, but you can't bury who you are forever. As she walked away, the crowd's whispers followed. Questions about her tattoo, her background, why a SEAL commander was watching her like she was more than what her file claimed. For the first time in 2 years, she felt exposed, seen. But beneath the fear, something else stirred, a flicker she hadn't felt since before Afghanistan. Pride. And that terrified her most of all. What happens when the cheers die, but the silence does? Sarah sat in the corner of the base coffee shop, a paper cup of black coffee cooling between her hands. Outside, the California sun still blazed, but inside, the shadows stretched long and sharp. She'd cleared her rifle, left the range, but the weight hadn't left her shoulders. If anything, it pressed harder now. The applause had chased her off the line. A sea of faces whispering her name, speculating, connecting dots. She wanted anonymity. She lived for it the past 2 years. But 60 shots had undone all of it. The chair across from her scraped, and she didn't need to look up to know who it was. Commander Harrison sat down with the quiet efficiency of someone who belonged everywhere he chose to be. He didn't order coffee, didn't waste words. He only studied her with those eyes, eyes that had seen too much and missed nothing. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence thickened. Sarah stared at her reflection in the cold coffee, distorted and fractured. Finally, Harrison broke it. "Sergeant Martinez." The way he said her name, her rank, made her throat tighten. She hadn't heard it spoken with weight in years. "You want to tell me," Harrison continued, voice low, "why someone with a tattoo like yours is pushing paper in a supply room?" Sarah's first instinct was denial. She opened her mouth, but the words caught, flimsy, before they even formed. Harrison's gaze pinned her in place. He wasn't accusing. He wasn't mocking. He was simply waiting. Her fingers tightened around the cup until it crinkled. She took a shaky breath. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," he said. The coffee smelled bitter, metallic, like burned earth. She let the words fall, quiet at first, then heavier with each sentence. 2 years ago, I was in Afghanistan, 19th Special Forces Group, MOS 18 Bravo, Weapons Sergeant. Harrison gave a single nod. He'd suspected as much, but hearing her confirm it was different. "We were training Afghan soldiers," she continued, her eyes distant, seeing something far beyond the walls of the shop. "Remote outpost, not much more than a collection of mud walls and sandbags. We were undermanned, undersupported, and then the attack came." Her voice faltered. Harrison didn't interrupt. He let her fight her way through it. "They hit us with mortars first, then small arms fire. We were spread thin, covering every angle, and then," her jaw clenched, "I saw him, a figure in the dust, small, too small, but he was carrying an RPG." Her breath shuddered. "I didn't think, I reacted. Training took over. I read the distance, adjusted for wind, fired, perfect hit." Her hands trembled, the coffee rippled. "When the dust cleared, I saw him. Not a man, not a fighter, a boy, 14, maybe younger. The Taliban had put the launcher in his hands and shoved him forward." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She had trained herself too hard for that. "I killed him with one perfect shot." Silence swallowed the table. "The investigation cleared me," she added bitterly. "They said it was justified, tactically sound. That RPG would have killed my team. But tell me, Commander, what good is being cleared if I can't close my eyes without seeing him fall?" Her voice cracked just once. "So I asked for transfer, supply, paperwork, somewhere I couldn't hurt anyone else." The words sat heavy between them, heavier than the silence had been. Harrison leaned back, his jaw tight. He'd heard stories like this before. Different names, different missions, but the same wound. He finally spoke. The Taliban weaponized that boy. They used his innocence against you. Sarah's head snapped up, eyes flashing. He's still dead. Yes, Harrison said quietly, and that's a tragedy you'll carry. But if you hadn't taken that shot, more than one body would have dropped. Maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe children in that outpost school. The Taliban would celebrate it, forced 10 more boys into carrying weapons. You didn't kill a child, Martinez. You killed a weapon they forced into his hands. Her lips pressed tight, but her hands trembled harder now. The anger, the grief, the guilt, all knotted together. I know the arguments. I've heard them from therapists, chaplains, officers. They don't stop the nightmares. Harrison studied her face, the haunted lines around her eyes. He'd seen the same look in mirrors, in brothers in arms who carried ghosts of their own. Survivor's guilt. The curse of precision, when your greatest gift left scars no one else could see. So you buried yourself, he said softly. You hid in supply, pretended you were ordinary. It seemed safer, she whispered. If I never touched a rifle again, I couldn't make another mistake. But today, Harrison said, leaning forward, you remembered who you are. Her eyes flickered, torn between pride and pain. When called you a cheater, Harrison continued, when they laughed you didn't freeze, you didn't walk away. You fought back the only way you know how, with skill. Her voice shook. And what good does that do? I'm just proving what I already know, that I'm dangerous. No, Harrison said, firm now, that you're exceptional. The word struck her like recoil. Exceptional. She hadn't let herself believe that in years. Harrison reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. A photo filled the screen, SEALs in combat gear, standing in front of a battered Afghan schoolhouse. Children in the background, dusty, frightened, but alive. This was 3 months ago, Harrison said. Hostage rescue. Taliban had 6 fighters holding 15 kids and their teacher. The shots had to be perfect. Any mistake and innocent blood would cover that classroom. We pulled it off, but it took 3 snipers working together to make those shots. Sarah studied the photo, her heart pounding. She could see it, every angle, every firing line, the physics of precision. Her instincts mapped it in seconds. With your ability, Harrison said, one shooter could done it. Her chest tightened. You're recruiting me. I'm offering you a chance, he replied. A chance to stop hiding, to take what you see as a curse and use it to save lives. Her breath caught. A chance. The word felt dangerous. What if I freeze again? What if I see another child? Then you'll make the call, Harrison said simply. With your experience, with your conscience. And you won't be alone. You'll have a team that understands what it means to carry demons. She looked down at her hands, calloused fingers wrapped around a paper cup, knuckles trembling. For 2 years she'd lived small, muted, hidden. But in one day on the range, something had woken inside her. Pride, anger, stillness. She wasn't sure she could ever bury it again. Her voice was barely a whisper. And if I fail? Then we deal with it together, Harrison said. His tone softened, almost fatherly. Every operator carries scars. The difference between good and great isn't the absence of trauma. It's whether you can use it to make better choices. The coffee was cold, bitter, but she sipped it anyway, grounding herself in the taste. She thought of her father, of his whisper in the desert, still inside. For the first time in years, she wondered if maybe she could be. She met Harrison's gaze. When do you need an answer? Take your time, he said, standing. He placed a small card on the table, nothing more than a name and a number. But don't let fear make your choice. Today, you proved you haven't lost your edge. Maybe it's time you stopped running from yourself. Sarah stared at the card long after he left. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of fire. She slipped the card into her pocket, finished the last bitter sip of coffee, and stood. Her steps were lighter than they'd been in 2 years. How do you sleep when your own mind refuses to let you? Sarah lay on her bunk in the dim barracks, staring at the ceiling. The base was quiet, lights low, but her thoughts refused to be. The coffee shop conversation echoed in every corner of her head. Harrison's voice, his eyes, his words, "Don't let fear make your choice." Fear had been her compass for 2 years. She obeyed it, followed it, let it guide her into shadows where no one asked questions. Supply rooms, checklists, boxes stacked higher than ambition. Safe. Safe but empty. Now she couldn't escape the images. Not just the boy in Afghanistan, not just the blood on sand, but the targets falling at 600 yards, the applause, the hush that had fallen when her bullets carved perfection out of distance. She hadn't wanted to feel it, but she had. Pride. And that scared her more than the nightmares. She closed her eyes, willing sleep. Instead, memory dragged her backward. The desert outside Los Angeles. 12 years old, the sun dipping low. Her father kneeling beside her, hands rough from work, eyes tired but alive in that moment. "Again," he said, placing the rifle back in her hands. "Breathe, don't rush." Her small arms ached. The can on the rock blurred. She blinked hard, fought tears. Her father's voice softened. "You think this is about hitting the can? No, this is about you learning how to quiet the storm inside. Out there," he nodded toward the horizon, "life will throw noise at you. Violence, cruelty, lies. But in here," he tapped her chest, "you can be still. If you can be still here, you can survive anything." She remembered how the rifle felt then. Too heavy, too large. But when the shot rang out and the can jumped, her father had smiled. Just a small smile, but it had been everything. She'd been chasing that smile her whole life. Her eyes opened to the ceiling. No smile here, no father, only questions. Could she go back? Could she be that still again, not just on a range, but when the chaos was real, when lives hung on her precision? The nightmares didn't wait for answers. She dreamt of the boy again, his small body crumpling, the weapon falling, the dust swallowing him, her team's voices cheering, calling her a lifesaver, a hero, and her own stomach twisting, bile rising. She woke with a gasp, sweat soaking her shirt, heart pounding. The room was dark, but the ghost stayed. He always did. She sat up, head in hands. This was why she had buried herself in supply, why she had told herself she was done, to avoid nights like this. But Harrison's voice cut through even the nightmares. "You didn't kill a child. You killed a weapon they forced into his hands." She wanted to believe him, but the image of the boy's eyes would not fade. The next day she went through the motions. Supply logs, inventory checks, paperwork. Soldiers came and went, signing out equipment. Some whispered about her now. News of her perfect score had spread across the base like fire through dry grass. She felt their stares, their curiosity. Some gave her respect. Some gave her resentment. But none of it mattered as much as the silence that followed her everywhere she walked. She wanted to disappear again, but she couldn't. The silence was different now. It wasn't invisibility, it was expectation. At lunch she sat alone in the mess hall, tray untouched, voices buzzing around her, words she couldn't quite hear. And then suddenly she felt it, eyes on her. She turned. Harrison. He didn't sit with her this time, didn't approach, just nodded once from across the room as if to remind her the choice was still hers. Then he left. The nod burned in her chest long after he was gone. That night she drove off base. The highway stretched empty under the California stars. She didn't know where she was going until she pulled off the road into the desert, headlights cutting through sand and scrub. She stopped, killed the engine, and sat in silence. The desert air was cold, biting against her skin. Slowly she stepped out, opened her trunk, and pulled out the rifle case. The same one she had carried to the range. The same one that had betrayed her secret. She set up a small target against a rock outcrop. The desert was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against your ears. She lay prone, the rifle pressed into her shoulder, and breathed. This wasn't a competition. No audience, no scoreboard, no commander, just her, the rifle, the night. The first shot cracked, echoing into the emptiness. The round struck the center. She loaded another, fired again, another perfect. Shot after shot, she fell into rhythm. Her breathing steadied, her heartbeat slowed, and for the first time in years she felt it again, the stillness inside. But then the ghosts came back, the boy's face, the cheers from her team, the blood on the dust. Her hands shook. She pulled the rifle away, sat up, chest heaving. The desert didn't care, the stars didn't care. The silence swallowed her like always. She pressed her hands over her face. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't." But another voice, quieter, older, slipped in, her father's. "If you can be still inside, you can survive anything." She lowered her hands, looked at the rifle, looked at the target riddled with holes, all clustered tight in the center. She could still do it. The skill hadn't left, the ghosts hadn't taken it. The question wasn't can she. The question was should she. She sat in the desert until dawn, the rifle across her knees, the horizon bleeding light. When the sun rose, she felt no closer to an answer, but she knew one thing. She couldn't go back to being invisible. What happens when the world asks you to prove yourself before you've even made a choice? Sarah was back in supply the next morning, filling out forms, signing off on gear no one would remember, trying to pretend her desert night hadn't happened. But the silence around her felt sharper now. Soldiers came and went with glances that lingered too long. A few offered congratulations, half smiles meant to be friendly. Others muttered when they thought she couldn't hear. None of it mattered as much as the moment her office door opened, and Commander Harrison filled the frame. "Walk with me," he said. No salute, no order, just a command disguised as an invitation. Sarah hesitated, pen frozen over paper. She wanted to tell him she was busy. She wanted to tell him she'd already made up her mind. But the truth was she hadn't. So she rose, set the pen down, and followed. They walked across the base in silence. Harrison's stride was measured, steady. Sarah's was cautious, every step carrying questions she wasn't ready to ask. Finally she spoke, "Where are we going?" Harrison didn't slow. Observation range, training exercise. She frowned. "Why me?" "Because you need to see." They passed through checkpoints, the air shifting as they entered a section of the base she hadn't stepped into in years. The sound hit first, gunfire cracking, boots pounding, instructors barking commands. SEAL candidates moved through a course with brutal intensity. Mud, sweat, precision. Sarah stopped at the edge, watching. The smell of cordite and churned earth pulled at her memory. She swallowed hard. Harrison glanced at her. "You've been hiding from this. Better to face it here, controlled, than wait until it hits you in the dark." "I didn't agree to this," she murmured. "You agreed the moment you stepped onto that competition line," Harrison replied. "Skill like yours doesn't go unnoticed." She wanted to argue, but he was right and they both knew it. An instructor called out, "Sniper element set." Two candidates dropped prone, rifles aligned on distant steel silhouettes. Wind gusted across the field. Targets shimmered. Sarah's pulse quickened. She knew what they were seeing, what adjustments they'd need. Her eyes scanned flags, mirage waves. Her fingers twitched as if reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Both shooters fired, one hit, one missed. "Correction," the instructor barked. Sarah couldn't help it. "Too much hold left," she muttered under her breath. Wind dropped right before the shot. Harrison heard. He gave her a look. "Say it louder." Her jaw clenched. "I'm not." "Say it." She exhaled sharply, raised her voice. He overcompensated. Wind shifted right, needed half a minute less hold. The instructor's head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. Harrison gave a small nod of confirmation. The instructor relayed the correction. The candidate fired again. This time, perfect center hit. The range echoed with the ring of steel. The candidate looked back, confused. "Who?" "Doesn't matter," the instructor barked. "Listen and learn." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks. She wanted to step back, to vanish. But Harrison's gaze held her in place. Another round of shots. Another miss. Another correction from Sarah, unwilling at first, then sharper, quicker. Each time the result was the same, steel ringing true. By the fifth correction, even the candidates were glancing toward her with grudging respect. The instructors exchanged looks. Harrison only watched, arms crossed, silent. When the drill ended, Sarah stepped back, her chest tight. "This isn't fair," she muttered. "What is?" Harrison asked. "You dragging me into this, making me," she shook her head. "I didn't come here to show off." Harrison's tone was calm, but it cut clean. "You didn't come here to hide either. Not anymore." Sarah turned away, staring at the field. Candidates were resetting targets. Mud streaked on their uniforms, faces etched with exhaustion. And for a moment she saw herself there, 2 years ago, before everything broke. Her voice was low. "You don't understand. I can hit targets all day long. Paper, steel, doesn't matter, but people. Children forced into weapons, I can't." Her throat closed. Harrison stepped closer, his words quiet enough only she could hear. "That choice will always haunt you. Nothing I say will change that. But tell me, if another team, another schoolhouse, another 15 kids were held at gunpoint, would you rather be the one with the rifle, or would you rather watch someone else miss the shot?" Her stomach twisted. "You think hiding makes you harmless," Harrison continued. "But hiding only denies the lives you could save." The words lodged in her chest like shrapnel. She wanted to hate him for saying it, but part of her knew he was right. The rest of the day blurred. She returned to supply, sat at her desk, stared at forms she couldn't read. Her pen hovered unmoving. When night came, she walked the base aimlessly. The air was cool, stars bright. Voices from the training range still echoed in her ears. Steel ringing, instructors shouting, her own voice calling corrections she hadn't meant to. She stopped at the motor pool, leaning against a Humvee, staring at the dark horizon. And then she heard it again, her father's whisper, still inside. She realized something then. She wasn't afraid of failure. She was afraid of success. Afraid of proving that she still had it, because if she did, she'd have no excuse left. Her phone buzzed, a message, unknown number. "Tomorrow 600, range 12, bring your rifle." No signature, but she knew who it was. She closed her eyes, phone heavy in her hand. She had a choice. She always had a choice. But the silence inside her wasn't as loud as it used to be. What happens when the ghosts you fear most wait for you at the end of your own rifle? Dawn broke pale over camp. The sky was still heavy with sleep, colors washed in gray and faint gold. Sarah walked with her rifle case slung over her shoulder, boots crunching against the gravel, heart steady but heavy. Range 12 loomed ahead, an isolated training ground used for advanced exercises. She had never set foot there before. She checked the time, 5:57, 3 minutes early. She hated herself for it. Her discipline hadn't faded even when she wanted it to. Harrison was already there. Of course he was. Standing at the edge of the range, arms crossed, eyes sharp in the cool morning light. "You came," he said simply. "I said I'd think about it," she replied. He nodded toward the setup ahead. The range wasn't a flat line of targets. It was a course, moving silhouettes, pop-up threats, multiple distances layered together. Urban walls and desert berms built into a chaotic landscape. "You're going to run it," Harrison said. Her mouth went dry. "This isn't what I agreed to." "You didn't agree to anything," Harrison said. "But here you are, which tells me you want to know the answer as badly as I do." Her fingers tightened on the case. She could walk away. Nothing stopped her, except the thought of going back to paperwork, to hiding, to nightmares without purpose. She set the case down, opened it, and began assembling her rifle. Each click of metal sliding into place echoed louder than the dawn birds. Harrison stepped closer. "This isn't about score. It's about whether you can be still inside when the targets don't wait for you." Sarah swallowed hard. She lay prone at the starting position. The ground was cold, damp from the night. She pressed her cheek against the stock, breathed, and waited. The signal horn blared. The first targets popped, 2 silhouettes at 100 yards. She fired before the thought finished forming. 2 center hits. Movement to the left, 2 more, advancing. She shifted, compensated for speed, dropped them both. The course unfolded fast, chaotic, targets at 300, then 250, then 600 all the way at the back. The wind kicked up, flags snapping, mirage bending the air. Her instincts woke like they'd never slept. Calculations flashed without conscious thought. Shots cracked. Steel rang. By the 10th target, sweat ran down her spine, not from effort but from memory. The battlefield rhythm was back, and with it the ghosts. A pop-up silhouette appeared suddenly at 200, thin shoulders, smaller frame. Her breath caught. A child. Her finger froze on the trigger, the shape blurred. The Afghan hillside roared back into her mind. Dust, blood, a boy with an RPG too heavy for his arms. Her chest seized. She couldn't breathe, couldn't fire. Martinez, Harrison's voice cut through the static, sharp, commanding, target. Her vision tunneled. The boy's eyes stared at her from years away, her pulse hammered. And then another voice, quieter, older. Her father's, still inside, even when everything around you is chaos. She closed her eyes, drew in a breath, opened them again. The target wasn't a boy. It was cardboard and paint, lines and angles, nothing more. She fired, the round punched center. She exhaled, long and shaking. The course didn't wait. More targets popped, clustered, moving, some hostile, some friendly, silhouettes painted with blue markers. She forced herself to slow, to distinguish. Twice she held her fire when the targets flashed civilian. Once she shifted mid-trigger squeeze, correcting just before a mistake. By the end, her shoulders ached. Her cheek was raw against the stock, and the last casing clinked onto the dirt. The horn sounded, end of course. Silence followed, broken only by the ringing in her ears. Harrison stepped forward, scanning the targets. His face revealed little, but his voice carried weight. 55 out of 60. Sarah's chest tightened. I froze. You breathed, Harrison corrected, and you fired. Her jaw clenched. That hesitation, if it had been real. Then you made the right call, Harrison cut in. You saw the ghost, not the target. And you didn't pull the trigger until you knew the difference. That's not weakness, Martinez. That's judgment. She shook her head. It still felt like failure. Harrison crouched beside her, voice steady. Failure is shooting when you're not sure. Failure is pulling the trigger because fear tells you to. What you did was control. That's the difference between someone who survives and someone who saves others. Her eyes burned, but she blinked the tears back. It doesn't erase the boy. No, Harrison said quietly. It never will, but it means the next child you see might live because you waited long enough to tell the difference. The words sat heavy, but something in her chest loosened. She stood, rifle slung across her back. The sun had risen higher, painting the desert gold. Sweat clung to her skin, but for the first time in years it wasn't the sweat of fear. It was the sweat of effort, of purpose. Harrison watched her carefully. You've got the skill. The question is whether you've got the will. Only you can answer that. Sarah looked out across the range, at the cardboard silhouettes standing limp where her rounds had torn them. They looked nothing like people, and yet every shot had carried a weight. Her voice was low. I don't know if I'm ready. Harrison gave a small nod. Readiness isn't the point. The point is whether you're willing to step into the arena anyway. No one's ever ready. Not really. The wind stirred, lifting dust around their boots. Sarah glanced down, then back at the horizon. She wasn't sure if the stillness inside her was victory or surrender, but it was there. And for the first time since Afghanistan, she felt like she could breathe without choking on ghosts. What do you do when silence no longer feels like safety, but like a cage? Sarah sat alone in her barracks room that night, rifle case leaned against the wall, Harrison's card on the desk beside it. The day still pulsed in her veins, the crack of live rounds, the sting of recoil, the ghost that had risen and nearly broken her, and the stillness that had finally steadied her. She stared at the card, just a name, a number, a door she could open or leave shut forever. 2 years of hiding pressed down on her, the endless supply logs, the paperwork, the avoidance, the nightmares that refused to loosen their grip no matter how small she lived. She had thought silence was healing, but silence had become suffocation. She closed her eyes. The boy's face returned as it always did, dust on his cheeks, fear in his eyes, the RPG heavy in his arms, her bullet cutting through him like inevitability. Her breath caught, but this time she didn't turn away. She let herself see him. She let herself remember. And then she remembered something else. The 15 Afghan trainees who had lived because the rocket never fired. Her own team, still breathing because she had stopped it. The women and children in that village, spared from the shrapnel that would have torn through their homes. The boy was still dead. That truth would never leave. But for the first time, Sarah felt the weight tilt, not erased, not forgiven, but balanced. Her father's voice returned, steady as the desert wind, still inside, even when everything around you is chaos. She opened her eyes. The room was quiet, but inside she was still. The next morning she walked across base as the sun lifted the fog. Soldiers watched her pass, some curious, some respectful, some still resentful. It didn't matter. Their stares no longer defined her. Harrison was waiting near the motor pool, arms crossed, as if he'd known she would come. "You've made your choice," he said, not a question. Sarah nodded. "I don't know if I'm ready, I don't know if I ever will be, but I'm done hiding." A rare smile touched his face, not victory, recognition. "Then we'll start." The details came fast, training pipelines, cross-service transfer programs, the brutal road ahead. Sarah listened, steady, not with excitement, not with dread, just with resolve. Later she drove off base again, back into the desert, the place where it had all started, the place her father had taught her to shoot. She set up a single can on a rock, lay prone, and let the rifle settle into her shoulder. The desert was silent, her breathing slow, the shot cracked and the can jumped. She lowered the rifle, staring at the dust settling back into stillness. For the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted. She didn't feel cursed. She didn't feel invisible. She just felt like herself. And that was enough. As the sun dipped low, she whispered into the wind, "I'm still inside, Dad, I'm still here." The desert carried her words away, leaving only silence. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of choice. The silence of dignity. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.